No, man, like shit. Alright, then.
During the operation, however, the doctor was astonished to find that the bumps were actually unusual growths. After the surgery, when the bandages were removed.
Imagine being 16 again. The world feels full of hope, full of potential. You believe in love, in dreams, and in the idea that anything is possible. Now, what happens when that world, the one you thought you knew, is torn apart? When someone shows up in your life, seemingly perfect, and you let them in, believing they'll be the one to make everything fall into place, only to realize, much too late, that it was all a lie. A lie that changes everything. A lie that traps you, makes you believe you are something you're not. And before you even understand the danger, it's too late. For Shamiya Allen, a 16-year-old girl from Indiana, that is exactly what happened. A dream that quickly became her nightmare. At 16, Shamiya thought she had the world at her feet. She was young, vibrant, and full of dreams far bigger than the small town she called home. But one fateful encounter was about to change the course of her life forever. Shamiya met Brian Jackson, a 31-year-old tattoo artist, full of confidence and charm, with a presence that made him impossible to ignore. He wasn't like the boys she went to school with. No, Brian was different. He was older, experienced, and captivating. For Shamiya, this felt like her chance to experience something new, something real, something she'd only read about in books. He seemed perfect, until everything began to shift. Do you know someone who's ever been in a relationship like this? A relationship where the other person seemed perfect, until they weren't? Have you ever watched someone you care about fall into a situation where they couldn't see what was really happening? If so, share this video with them. Let's make sure no one ends up in the same trap. Like, subscribe to this channel, and comment if you've seen any warning signs of toxic relationships before. Let's talk about it. Shamiya and Brian's relationship started like any other love story. They spent time together, shared laughs, and found common ground in their interests. Shamiya was captivated by Brian's attention and experience. He made her feel special, like she was someone important. It didn't take long before he began to isolate her from her friends and family. Slowly, the boundaries between them blurred. She was no longer just a teenager in her world. She was part of his world, and in that world, there was no room for anyone else. She started to believe that this was the life she was meant to lead. This was the man who would help her escape the mundane. But there was something hidden behind his kindness, something Shamiya couldn't yet see. It was supposed to be a fairy tale, but what happens when the dream you've built starts to crumble around you? When the love that once felt so real begins to feel suffocating? Let me take you deeper into this twisted journey, because what began as a beautiful dream for Shamiya quickly turned into something completely different. Something that would trap her, break her, and leave her questioning everything she once believed about love. As the days turned into months, Shamiya began to lose herself. At first, it was subtle. Small comments from Brian about her appearance, who she could talk to, and what she could do. It didn't seem like much, but over time, these remarks started to add up. Her life was no longer hers to control. Brian had slowly replaced her independence with his rules, his demands, and his expectations. He would shower her with affection, then pull away, leaving her scrambling for approval, for reassurance that he loved her, that he needed her. Emotional manipulation became his tool, and Shamiya found herself trapped in a cycle she couldn't break. The affection, the praise, it all started to feel like a game she couldn't win. What started as tenderness slowly turned into something darker, something more violent. At this point, let's take a moment. Have you ever witnessed a relationship where one person was controlled, manipulated, or isolated from their loved ones? Share your thoughts, because your experiences might just help someone else see the warning signs before it's too late. In the beginning, it all seemed so simple. Shamiya believed she was in love. She thought she was building something real, something that would last. But love, as she would soon learn, can be so much more than what it appears on the surface. It can be controlling, manipulative, and suffocating. And sometimes, you don't even see it until you're trapped inside, desperately trying to keep something that's slipping through your fingers. By the time Shamiya realized she was in over her head, it was almost too late. Her world was no longer hers to navigate. It was controlled by someone else, and the harder she tried to hold on, the further she sank. Shamiya's life began to change when she found out she was pregnant with Brian's child. At first, there was hope. There was the idea that this new life, this new responsibility, could bring them closer, could make things better. But instead, everything started to fall apart faster. Brian's behavior became more unpredictable, more demanding. He no longer treated her like the girl he once loved. He treated her like property. The manipulation deepened, and Shamiya began to believe she couldn't live without him. She became convinced that everything that went wrong was her fault. It didn't matter how hard she tried, how much she sacrificed, it was never enough for Brian. His control over her grew, and with every passing day, she felt herself slipping further away from the person she used to be. She tried to hold on to what little they had left, but the harder she clung, the more distant he became. The words of reassurance she once received were replaced with harsh accusations, each one more damaging than the last. She was trapped, and she didn't even know how to escape. Her life was now a constant battle to keep Brian happy, to make him see her worth, even as he continued to tear her down. But deep down, Shamiya knew that this wasn't the love she had imagined. The dream she had been sold was nothing more than a nightmare. Then, on January 29th, 2025, everything came crashing down. What was supposed to be a normal night turned into something no one could have imagined. The 911 call came in from Brian Jackson, reporting that Shamiya had broken into his house, armed with a gun. A situation that quickly escalated from a simple domestic dispute into something far worse. When police arrived at the scene, they found Shamiya's lifeless body on the floor, a gunshot wound to her head. Brian's story didn't add up. He claimed it was an act of self-defense, that Shamiya had forced her way in. But there was something about the way he told it that didn't seem right. Brian's lack of emotion in the aftermath only raised more questions. When someone you love dies, when someone you've shared your life with is taken from you, how do you react? What would you expect from someone in that situation? Would you expect anger, grief, or maybe even disbelief? Or would you expect them to go online, almost immediately, and post about it, detached from the pain, almost as if they were talking about something that didn't matter at all? That's exactly what Brian did. In the hours following Shamiya's death, he didn't mourn. He didn't seek solace or comfort from family or friends. Instead, he took to social media to talk about it. His posts weren't filled with grief or sorrow. They were cold, matter-of-fact, and full of contradictions. How could someone react this way to a life lost? How could someone who supposedly loved her sound so indifferent? Was this the behavior of someone who was truly grieving? Or was it the reaction of someone trying to cover up their involvement in what had just happened? These were the questions that began to haunt the investigation. And then, as if the situation wasn't strange enough, something else appeared. Shamiya's supposed suicide note. The note was posted on her Facebook account, hours after her death, and it seemed like a confession. It was filled with apologies, regret, and statements that made it seem as though she had taken her own life. But there was something off about it. The words didn't sound like something Shamiya would say. The way it was written felt almost rehearsed, too perfect, too fitting for the narrative Brian was trying to sell. Many believed it wasn't Shamiya at all who had written it, but Brian, trying to cover his tracks, trying to rewrite the story to make himself look like the innocent victim. And the more Brian posted, the more the truth seemed to slip further away. His words only deepened the suspicion that he was controlling the story, controlling the narrative, even after Shamiya was gone. This story is far more complicated than it seems. It's about love, manipulation, and the things we do when we think no one is watching. So, if you haven't already, like and subscribe to stay with us as we continue to uncover the truth behind Shamiya's tragic end. Let's dig deeper into what really happened that night, and what we can learn from this story. You don't want to miss what's coming next. When Shamiya Allen's life was violently cut short, it wasn't just a tragedy. It was a wake-up call, a painful reminder of how easily someone can slip through the cracks, how easily someone can disappear beneath the weight of manipulation, control, and abuse. Her story, now haunting, is not just about the end of a young life. It's about the broken pieces that remain behind, the questions that never stop echoing. Could it have been prevented? Could the people who loved her have done more? The pain that Danielle Pearson, Shamiya's mother, now carries with her every day is unfathomable. But amidst the heartbreak, she's determined to make sure her daughter's death wasn't in vain. She's speaking out not just for herself, but for all the young women who may find themselves walking down the same dangerous path. And through her grief, there's something she knows for sure. The fight for justice isn't over. The day Shamiya was taken from the world, Danielle Pearson's world shattered. The weight of losing a daughter is something no one should have to endure, but for Danielle, it wasn't just the loss that hurt. It was the realization of how Shamiya had been manipulated, trapped in a cycle she couldn't escape. Danielle's pain is raw and unrelenting, and it's clear. Her daughter didn't deserve this. Shamiya's life was stolen from her, and all she had wanted was to be loved. But the love she found wasn't real. It was twisted, controlling, and dangerous. As Danielle fights for justice, she also fights to make sure Shamiya's story is shared, that others see the warning signs she missed. She wants people to understand the destructive power of manipulation in relationships, how easy it is to fall into something you can't get out of, and how important it is to listen to those warning bells before it's too late. If you've ever known someone in a relationship like Shamiya's, someone who was manipulated, controlled, or made to feel like they were worth less than they really are, this is your chance to speak out. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's all come together and find ways to help young women recognize the signs of an unhealthy relationship before it's too late. Show your support for Shamiya's family. Let's use this space to make sure her voice is heard, to make sure that this tragedy doesn't fade into the background. Because no one should ever have to suffer in silence. They all saw the changes, the growing distance, the subtle hints of control. They knew something wasn't right, but for so many, it wasn't obvious enough to act. And for others, perhaps it was too easy to ignore. The sad truth is that manipulation and emotional abuse don't always show their face until it's too late. There's no handbook that teaches us how to spot these signs early on, and by the time people started to realize what was happening, Shamiya was already too deep in it. So, we ask ourselves, could the justice system have done more? Could society have done more? How often do we miss the signs of abuse, especially when it's wrapped in the guise of love? This is not just Shamiya's story. It's a story about all of us, and how we all have a responsibility to protect those we love. Shamiya's story is one that should never be forgotten. It is a reminder that love can sometimes be disguised as control. It's a warning about the power of manipulation and the lengths some people will go to in order to hold onto power. But above all, it's a story of loss. A life that should have had the chance to grow, to love, to experience everything that the world has to offer. Taken too soon. As we close, we can't just let this be a sad memory. Shamiya's legacy must live on through us. Through the conversations we have, the awareness we raise, and the actions we take to protect others. Please, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Share this video with others to raise awareness. Let's make sure Shamiya's voice is never silenced. Let's make sure her story helps prevent the next tragedy. Rest in peace, Shamiya. Your story will never be forgotten.